There's an instrument in the orchestra that can do almost anything. It can leap, it can soar, it's acrobatic, it can melt your heart. Yes, I'm talking about the clarinet. And today with Toronto Symphony Orchestra clarinetist Eric Abramovitz, you'll be learning all about the clarinet, how to put it together, how to take it apart, how to make a sound, how to take care of the reed, how to breathe, all these different things that will start you off on your clarinet journey. You'll be joining hundreds of students from all over Ontario, and because it is a video, if at any point you want to practice, we encourage you that you stop the video or pause the video and practice the things that Eric is going to be teaching you. Now, if you have questions at the end of the video, please be sure to contact us at schoolconcerts@tso.ca. That's schoolconcerts@tso.ca, and we will do our best to get back to you and give you the information that you need. So, get ready for your first clarinet lesson with Eric Abramovitz. Enjoy.
Hi there, my name is Eric Abramovitz and I play the clarinet in the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. I'm so happy to be with you today to share some advice on how to start off playing the clarinet. What I love about the clarinet is that it's got such a beautiful sound and it's so versatile. I can play many different styles of music and I feel like I can really express all my emotions on the clarinet. So let's have some fun. So the first step to playing the clarinet is, of course, opening up the case and assembling our clarinet. The clarinet is divided into 5 parts: the mouthpiece, the barrel, the upper joint, the lower joint, and the bell. We're going to start with our upper and lower joints because this is the most complicated part of the process, I would say. If you're having trouble distinguishing which is the upper and which is the lower, the upper has a cork on the top and on the bottom of the joint, whereas the lower joint only has a cork on the bottom, okay? So, I'd like to draw your attention to the connecting rods of the upper and lower joint. As you'll see, it's right there along the side of the upper joint and here at the top of the lower joint. These are important because when we put the upper and lower joint together, they have to connect and line up together. So, on the upper joint, you see this key right here. If I press it down, it actually lifts up the connecting rod. And so when we put the upper joint onto the lower joint, we want to be holding this key down so that the rod is lifted up and that when it goes onto the lower joint, it'll go right above it, just like that. So I've got my upper joint in my left hand, holding down this key to keep the connecting rod lifted. And I've got my lower joint on my right hand. So I'm going to slowly put the cork into the opening and in a twisting motion fasten it on while keeping this key pressed. Once I've got it down, I can release, and we want to make sure that these connecting rods are lined up together, one on top of the other. And I'll look down my clarinet just to make sure that it is lined up. Okay, once that part is done, the next step is putting on the bell. So I'm going to take my bell and once again in a twisting motion I'm going to fasten it on, and while you're holding your clarinet and putting it together, we want to try to avoid squeezing on the keys. So when you're putting on different pieces, try to hold the clarinet at a point where you're not crushing down on the keys, but you're just holding more of the body of the clarinet. The next step is putting on the barrel. Very easy, we get it on, twist it very easily. And finally, possibly the most important piece, the mouthpiece. Do the same thing, except this time, once again, we want to make sure that the mouthpiece is lined up. So, as you can see, the flat part of the mouthpiece here should be right in line with this register key, this long key right here. Alright, so now we've assembled our clarinet, but we're not quite done yet. And let me just add that at any point throughout this process, if you're having trouble getting the cork into the clarinet, which is sometimes the case, then you should use cork grease, which looks like a chapstick for your lips. And you would simply remove the cap and apply a thin layer all around the cork. And that will help the clarinet be put together much more easily. So now it's time to put on our reed and ligature, which, after all, are responsible for all the sound of the clarinet. Without the reed and ligature, nothing. Okay, so take your reed, and first we want to soak our reed either in a little cup of water or in our mouth. All right, once that is done, we're going to put the reed on the mouthpiece, on the flat part of the mouthpiece, and if you can see, the reed has kind of an arc at the top of it, just as the top of the mouthpiece has an arc as well. So we want to line up those two arcs. We don't want the reed to be too high or too low. We want them to really be one on top of the other. And then we want the bottom of our reed to be centered along the flat part of the mouthpiece. So not off to the left or the right, just right in the middle. Once I feel like my reed is lying on the mouthpiece in a comfortable way, I keep it on the mouthpiece with my thumb, and I get my ligature, and I slide it carefully down the mouthpiece with the screws in the front facing me. If the ligature is having a bit of trouble getting down the mouthpiece, you might want to loosen the screws a little bit and then try again. We don't want to put the ligature too far down or too high. It should look about like that. And then the final step is to tighten the screws, not too much, just until you get a little bit of resistance, and voila! Now we have an assembled clarinet ready to play. The next step is making our first sound. And for this, I need you to remove your barrel and mouthpiece from your clarinet, because that's all we need. So, I'll give you a few steps to form your mouth position or embouchure. The first step is creating a cushion that the reed will lie on in our mouth. So to do that, we're going to curl our bottom lip over our bottom teeth like this. And while we do that, we want to keep the chin muscles engaged and keep the chin flat. So that'll be what the reed rests on in our mouth. The next step would be to rest our top teeth on the top of the mouthpiece like this. Now when we're doing this, we want to make sure that we're not actually biting down on the mouthpiece, but just that our teeth are resting there. Once the mouthpiece is in our mouth and we've done the first two steps, then we want to basically hug the mouthpiece with our lips to close it off and to seal it so that the air is going right through the clarinet and that it's not escaping through the side of our mouth. And I'm keeping my chin flat and I'm keeping the corners of my mouth firm. And of course, I'm hugging around the mouthpiece with my lips. Once I've done that, all that's left to do is blow. Now, if you're still with me, and if you've successfully created a sound, I have one extra challenge for you, which is to start the note with your tongue. Now, what does that mean? In order to have a lot of control over when our note starts, before we play, we rest our tongue on the tip of the reed, and right as we start to blow, we release the tongue, and it gives a very precise attack on the front of the note. So if you think of starting your airstream with the syllable t, and this would be the result. Okay, if you've successfully created a sound, you're on your way to becoming a clarinetist. All right, now it's time to put our barrel and mouthpiece back on the clarinet, because I'm going to show you how to properly hold the clarinet and how to carry your body while playing the clarinet. First, we start with the right hand, the right thumb in particular. We're going to anchor our right thumb below the thumb rest right over here, but we don't want to put our thumb too deep down. We want the thumb rest to be kind of around where our nail is and a little bit past that. So this is going to be the main point of support for holding the clarinet, between the right thumb and of course our mouth. That's where the clarinet is being held from. Now for the fingers, you see there are these 3 open holes. So the top one is where we'll put our index finger, our first finger, then our second, third, and eventually our pinkies would be controlling these 4 keys over here. I know it seems like a big responsibility for one finger, but you'll see it's not that hard when you get there. Now, for our left hand, the left thumb will be covering this hole in the back, and also eventually it would also be controlling this long key called the register key. So our left thumb is there, and once again, the first hole that we see at the top of the clarinet is where our first finger goes, the next hole is for our second finger, and then the last hole is for our third finger here. Once again, our pinkies eventually would be controlling all of these keys around here. And our index would eventually be controlling these keys at the top as well. But don't worry about that for now. So that's how you should be holding the clarinet. Your hands should have a gentle curve to the fingers. It shouldn't be, we shouldn't be stretching to get there. It should be fairly natural. And we want to use the pads of our fingers, not our fingertips, but rather the fleshy part where our fingerprint is. Just like that. Now, if you're playing while sitting down, it's important to play with a straight back, your 2 feet planted on the ground, and we want the angle to be very natural. So we don't want to be too inwards like that or playing high like that. You know, just as my mouth naturally comes with my neck straight. Something like that. That is a proper posture. So it's the moment you've all been waiting for. We're going to play our first note together. Our first notes. So taking into account everything we've learned today, you now have the tools to play some notes on the clarinet. The first note we're going to start with is an E or a Mi on the bottom line of the staff. And to play the E, you have to cover the back hole here with your left thumb, and on the top joint with your index finger, you're going to cover the first hole. And it'll sound something like this. Okay, no fingers are down on the right hand. We're simply supporting the clarinet with our right thumb. Then, the next note we can go down to is a D by simply keeping the same fingering for the E and adding this covering this next hole. And then we can go even lower by covering the last hole on the upper joint with this finger right here. Now, of course, there are many, many more notes on the clarinet, and I invite you to consult a fingering chart that looks like this, and it'll show you how to do the fingerings for other notes. Thank you so much for being with me today. I hope that you've learned and enjoyed this session, and I wish you the best of luck on your journey as a clarinetist.